Hello and welcome to everybody tuning in today. I'm Billy Mitchell, Vice President of Content and Community for FedScoop, and I'm joined by Susan Wedge, Managing Partner and Public Market Leader for IBM. Susan, thanks so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Great, and thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I want to dive right in with a question on how have you seen the rate of transformation in the public sector accelerate in the past year, and what would you say drove that?
Yeah, there's no doubt that the pandemic drove an increase in demand for government services, and governments were forced to interact with residents, citizens in new ways and at a different pace than they ever had before. I know in our state and local clients, our clients saw huge increases in the demand for unemployment claims. Our clients also had to interact with citizens in new efforts like contact tracing and vaccine management. So it really drove just a different way of working for our clients, both internally and with their constituents. Um, in all of those cases, we saw governments quickly adopt new technologies, whether those be new cloud based platforms, artificial intelligence, and automation to enable their efforts.
That's a great start, Susan. And you mentioned where I wanted to go with the next question. You mentioned a couple emerging technologies in that opening answer. So I'd love to hear what emerging technology do you think has the greatest potential to uh, possibly revolutionize service and mission delivery in the public sector?
I think there's so many different technologies. If I boil it down to one, I would say artificial intelligence or AI is the one that's going to be at the foundation of all of it, enabling governments to deliver new outcomes and new experiences. So if I think about our clients over the past year and how they've applied AI, it's been everything from automation and automating intelligently using AI, their workflows to enable getting benefits out to residents more quickly. We've also seen our clients in doing so where they went from a matter of weeks to get services out to a matter of minutes. We also saw examples of where governments used artificial intelligence with digital assistance. So being able to respond quickly to questions, particularly frequently asked questions, and help serve and respond to the public at a much lower cost. And then the last area I'd point out is another area our clients used AI was making sense of vast amounts of disparate data, whether that be weather data, information on pandemic response, vaccines and pandemic response, and making sense of all of this data and enabling them to make decisions more quickly. So I think we've already seen that artificial intelligence is helping our clients, and I think that will be the foundation for the future.
So, Susan, I think in talking to CIOs and other IT leaders, one of the big things that you hear them say is they want to make sure they're ready for the next big crisis, the next pandemic that is inevitably coming. So, what has the coronavirus pandemic taught governments about what they can do now to prepare for that next major crisis?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that, there's no doubt the role of government in terms of preparation for response to and recovery from, major crises and disasters. And I would say there's a few things that governments have learned over the last, 12 to 15 months. The first one is how to acquire goods and services more quickly, right? So we saw things, whether it be emergency procurements, and things of that nature. So really being able to get the right goods and services at the right time. I think we also saw in governments lessons learned around how to operate both in person and in a remote capacity. So I think that was something. I would say how to introduce new technologies at scale. So government's always been introducing new technologies, but how to do it at scale and how to do it very rapidly. And the last lesson learned, I would say, is how to securely share data across organizational boundaries. As I think about, all of those lessons learned and what I'd recommend as governments start to think about how do I prepare for what's next, I really think it's making that shift and accelerating the migration to an open multi-cloud, hybrid cloud environment, right? That's the underpinnings that enables all of these technologies to work to enable them to deliver things better, faster, smarter, cheaper, and more securely. So being able to make that shift to the cloud and doing so now so that they're prepared to respond in the future.
So Susan, as we close out, you mentioned a lot of different things. You mentioned data, you mentioned artificial intelligence, and let's put it all together. How can public sector organizations more effectively use that data to drive that cognitive artificial intelligence, that cognitive enterprise that drives faster intelligence and accelerate workflows, empower people to focus on higher value work? How is this all coming together into one really powerful machine?
In my mind, it's really about putting data at the core, right? And so really seeing data as the resource that it is for governments to enable effective mission and service delivery. So some of our clients, for example, in the state and local space, are sharing data across social services programs to help them more effectively make decisions about who are the people most in need and how do they get those services to the right people at the right time. So I think it really comes down to putting that data at the core. And as you're designing, what do you want that outcome to be? What do you want the experience to be, both for your employees and for the citizens or constituents that you serve? It's really thinking about data as a core aspect of that, not just an after effect that we have to stitch together. So starting with data at the core, I think, is a key element to the future.
Susan, that's all I have, but thank you so much for your time, and it's been a pleasure chatting with you today.
Thanks, Billy. It's a great conversation.